The twin sons of Vareth burned the marketplace like open furnaces. The air shimmered above the dusty ground, and every breath tasted like dry sand. People moved slowly under the heat, their clothes wrapped tight to keep the sun away. In the center of the market stood a guarded stall, the only legal source of clean water. Tall metal tanks gleamed in the light, each drop inside worth more than gold. Lyra's heart was pounding as she stood in the shadows. Her small alien hands shook as she held an old metal flask close to her chest. Her skin, pale and cracked from dehydration, made her look older than her true age. She licked her dry lips and glanced at the guards. They were big, armored, and bored, but they never missed a thief. Her little brother was waiting in the ruins beyond the city. He hadn't spoken in 2 days, his eyes half closed, his lips split from thirst. Lyra knew he wouldn't survive another night without water. She took a deep breath, stepped out of the shadows, and moved toward the stall. Her bare feet made no sound on the hot stone. The closest guard glanced her way, but didn't seem to care. She reached the edge of the stall, her fingers brushing the cool metal tank. She turned the spout slowly, letting a thin stream of water fill her flask. The sound was the most beautiful thing she had ever heard. Her hands trembled, but she kept going, drop by drop. Then a sharp voice cut through the market. "You there?" A stop. Her eyes widened. The guard nearest her had turned. The water kept pouring, but her hand froze. Other guards turned their heads, and one pointed directly at her. "Water thief!" He shouted. The market seemed to explode with movement. Stall owners leaned forward. Eager to see the punishment, people began to gather, whispers filling the air. She slammed the flask shut and ran. Clutching it to her chest, boots thundered. Behind her, Lyra darted between stalls, dodging baskets of dry fruit and hanging cloths. The heat made her dizzy, but fear pushed her forward. She knew the punishment: losing a limb, usually the arm. It was meant to make sure no one ever stole again. She leaped over a cart and ran into a narrow alley, but a guard was already there, blocking the way. He grabbed her arm and yanked her hard. The flask almost slipped from her hand. "No, please." "My brother," she cried, but her voice was drowned by the crowd's jeers. They dragged her back toward the market square. The execution platform was already being prepared. A wooden block was placed in the center. The crowd gathered tightly, eyes shining with cruel excitement. Justice for the thief. Someone shouted. Lyra's heart raced. She struggled. But the guards were too strong. One of them held her wrist down on the block. The executioner, a tall alien with a curved blade, stepped forward. The sun caught the edge of the weapon, making it flash like fire. She tried to speak, but her throat was too dry. Tears stung her eyes. Not from fear for herself, but because if she died, her brother would die too. The executioner raised the blade slowly, enjoying the suspense. The crowd leaned in, silent now. Every sound seemed to vanish, except her rapid breathing. Then, voice broke through, deep and steady. "Stop." It wasn't loud, but it carried over the square like a command. The executioner froze mid-swing. The guards turned their heads, and the crowd parted slightly. A human stepped forward, tall, broad-shouldered, with a sun-worn face and calm eyes. His clothes were dusty from travel, but he moved with confidence. Humans were rare here. Most people had only heard of them. This one looked at the guards, then at Lyra. His jaw tightened as he spoke again. "You're not cutting off her arm?" The crowd gasped. The guards exchanged glances, unsure whether to laugh or draw their weapons. The executioner frowned. "This is our law, human." But the stranger didn't move aside. His voice was quiet but dangerous. "Then your law is wrong." Asterisk, asterisk. The crowd stared in shock at the human who had stepped forward. He was taller than most aliens present. His skin tanned from years under alien suns. A scar ran across his jaw. But his eyes were steady and sharp. The guards tightened their grip on Lyra, unsure whether to challenge him or wait for orders. The human moved closer, boots crunching on the hot stone. "I'm Marcus," he said evenly, "and I'll be taking her with me." The executioner barked out a laugh. "You think you can take a thief from our law, human?" Marcus didn't flinch. "She's not a thief. She's a girl trying to keep someone alive." Lyra's eyes widened at his words. She didn't know this man. Yet he was standing between her and the blade. The head guard stepped forward, his armor plates clicking. "The punishment is the same for everyone, an arm for stolen water," he growled. Marcus tilted his head slightly. "Then maybe your law needs changing." The crowd murmured, some offended, some curious. It wasn't every day someone openly challenged the water laws. The head guard's hand moved toward his weapon. "Leave now, human, or you'll lose more than your arm." Marcus's hand also dropped to his side, brushing the hilt of a worn but well-kept blade. "I don't scare easy," he replied, his voice quiet but carrying weight. Lyra could feel the tension thick in the air. Her captors shifted, unsure whether to attack or wait for a signal. The executioner looked at the guards, then at Marcus. "You want her? Pay for her crime." Marcus frowned. "How much for the water she took?" "Not about the water," the executioner spat. "It's about the rule. Fear keeps the people in line." Marcus's eyes narrowed. "Fear is not justice, eh?" Few in the crowd muttered in agreement, but most stayed silent. The head guard gestured to his men. "Take him." Two armored guards stepped forward, but Marcus's stance shifted. He was ready. His voice came again, low and steady. "You'll have to go through me first." The crowd collectively held its breath. One guard lunged forward, swinging his staff toward Marcus's side. Marcus moved with surprising speed, catching the staff with one hand and twisting hard. The guard yelped as the weapon was ripped away and clattered to the ground. Gasps and murmurs rippled through the market. The second guard hesitated, but the head guard barked, "Get him." Marcus stepped between Lyra and the attackers, his body a shield. "Run when I say," he murmured to her without turning his head. Lyra's hands gripped the flask tightly, her heart pounding. She had no idea who this human was, but in this moment, he was her only hope. The first guard staggered to his feet. Furious, Marcus sidestepped a swing, elbowed him in the ribs, and sent him sprawling again. The second guard swung low, but Marcus kicked the staff from his hands. The executioner took a step back, his confidence fading. The head guard's face darkened. No one embarrassed his men in public. "This is your last warning, human." The head guard roared. Marcus's answer was calm. "Then here's mine. Let her go." For a long moment, no one moved. Then a whistle rang out from somewhere in the crowd. A signal. More guards began pushing through the onlookers' weapons. In hand, Marcus glanced down at Lyra. "Now," he said. In the next instant, he shoved one guard aside and pulled Lyra free from the execution block. The crowd erupted into shouts as the two darted toward the nearest alley. The heat seemed to rise with every step behind them. Boots pounded on the stone. Lyra stumbled, but Marcus kept her moving. The narrow passage twisted left and right, stalls and crates blocking parts of the way. A thrown spear clanged off the wall just inches from her head. "Faster," Marcus urged, his voice calm but urgent. They burst out into a wider street and straight into another patrol. Marcus's eyes darted to the side, spotting an open doorway. He yanked Lyra inside just as the pursuing guards rounded the corner. They crouched in the shadows, breathing hard. Outside, the sound of shouting and running feet filled the air. Lyra looked at him with wide eyes. "Why? Why help me?" Marcus's gaze stayed on the street, watching for danger. "Because I've seen children die for water before," he said quietly. Something in his voice made her believe him before she could speak again. A shadow fell across the doorway. A deep voice growled from outside, "They're in here." The shadow in the doorway grew larger. Marcus's hand moved instantly to his blade. Lyra froze, her heart thundering in her chest. The voice outside growled again. "Come out, human, make it easy for yourself." Marcus didn't answer. Instead, he gestured for Lyra to move toward the back of the room. The place was an old storage shop, its shelves half broken, dust floating in the air. There was a narrow window in the back, just wide enough for Lyra to slip through. She looked at him, her voice shaking. "What about you?" "I'll be right behind you," Marcus said firmly. Footsteps thudded against the wooden floor as the guard entered. Marcus stepped forward, his presence filling the small space. The guard barely had time to raise his weapon before Marcus slammed the door into him. The man staggered back, and Marcus shoved Lyra toward the window. She climbed up quickly, scraping her knees on the rough frame. The hot air outside hit her like a wall. Marcus was right behind her, landing on the dusty alley ground with a soft thud, but the shouts were closer now. More guards were coming from both ends of the alley. "This way," Marcus said. Grabbing her wrist, they ran. Weaving between piles of broken crates and leaning walls, the air smelled of rust, heat, and desperation. Lyra clutched the flask tight against her chest. Even as her lungs burned, she refused to let go of it. A sharp whistle cut the air, the signal for reinforcements from the right, two armored guards charged toward them. Marcus pulled Lyra into a side path so narrow they had to run single file. The walls were so close, they scraped their shoulders. Behind them, heavy boots echoed like a drumbeat of doom. They burst out into a wider lane that opened toward the edge of the market. The crowd here was thinner. For a moment, Lyra thought they might escape, but then a spear whistled past her ear. Embedding itself into the wall ahead, she gasped, stumbling, but Marcus steadied her. "They're aiming to stop us, not kill us yet," Marcus muttered. "Why?" she asked breathlessly. "Because they want to make an example of you," he replied grimly. That thought made her legs shake, but she kept running. Every step felt like the last drop of strength she had. Up ahead, the street split into three paths. Marcus chose the middle one, heading toward the old quarter. Here, buildings leaned over the street like watchful giants. Shadows offered some relief from the burning sun, but the heat still clung to their skin like a second layer. Lyra's feet were blistered, but she didn't complain. She had lived her whole life in fear, yet somehow, running beside this strange human felt different. Like there was a chance, however small, to survive. The sounds of the market faded behind them. Now they heard only the distant shouts of the search teams. Marcus slowed, pulling her into a crumbling building. Inside, it was cooler, dark, and smelled of old stone. "This will do for now," he said, listening carefully at the doorway. Lyra sank against the wall. Panting, she held the flask close. As if it was her own heartbeat, Marcus crouched beside her. "How far is your brother from here?" She hesitated, unsure if she should trust him completely. But something in his voice told her she could. "In the ruins, past the old watchtower," she whispered. Marcus nodded. "We'll get there, but first, we need to shake them off." Her eyes darted toward the street. "What if they find us?" she asked, her voice trembling. Marcus's mouth tightened. "Then we fight, but I'd rather not." He moved to the corner and peeked outside. Two guards passed by, scanning doorways but not entering. The search was spreading wider. Marcus knew they had little time. He turned back to Lyra. "We'll move again, quietly this time." They slipped out through the back. The alleys here twisted like a maze. Every turn seemed to lead deeper into shadow, but Marcus moved with certainty. It was clear he had navigated dangerous streets before, at one point. They hid behind a pile of old barrels as a patrol marched past. Lyra's breath caught when one guard's gaze swept over their hiding spot, but he moved on, the sound of boots. Fading into the distance, Marcus gave her a small nod. They were still safe. For now, they reached the edge of the old quarter. Beyond this point lay the wastelands and ruins. If they made it there, they could vanish from the city's grip. But just as they stepped into the open, a familiar voice rang out. There they are. Marcus spun, his hand flying to his weapon. 4 guards charged toward them, weapons raised. Lyra's heart leaped into her throat. They were so close to freedom, but now it looked like they might lose everything. Marcus didn't waste a second. The moment the guard shouted, he shoved Lyra behind a collapsed wall and drew his blade. The 4 armored figures closed in fast, their weapons gleaming under the burning twin suns. One swung first, but Marcus stepped aside, catching the strike. On the flat of his sword and twisting the attacker's arm until the weapon clattered to the ground. Run. Marcus barked, but Lyra hesitated. She didn't want to leave him, not after he had risked so much already. Another guard lunged. But Marcus moved with practiced precision, striking low and sending the man stumbling. The opening was enough, and Lyra darted toward a narrow passage between 2 crumbling stone buildings. Marcus followed close behind, their footsteps pounding in unison. They emerged into a dim corridor-like alley. The smell of damp stone and rot replaced the dry heat. Of the market here, shadows clung to every corner. Marcus slowed, pressing himself to the wall. Listening, the guards' shouts were distant now. Echoing through the maze of alleys, "We can't keep running like this," Lyra panted. "They'll find us sooner or later." Marcus gave her a brief nod. "Then we stop running and start thinking." He crouched beside a broken doorway, gesturing for her to follow. Inside was an abandoned room. Dust, cracked walls, and a roof half collapsed. They sat in the cool gloom, breathing hard. Lyra still clutched the flask, her knuckles white. Marcus studied her face. "Tell me why they'd rather cut your arm off than take payment for the water." She looked down, avoiding his eyes. "It's the law," she murmured. "Always been this way." "That's not an answer," Marcus said quietly. She hesitated, then sighed. "The law isn't about water, it's about control." Her voice was low, as if speaking too loud might make the walls themselves betray her. "The ruling family owns all the water," she explained. "They make sure it's expensive, so only the rich can drink freely." Marcus's eyes narrowed, "And the poor? They beg or they die," she said simply. "Sometimes they work for years in the salt mines just to earn a week's worth of clean water." She swallowed hard. "If anyone steals, even a drop, they punish them in front of everyone. To scare the rest, they think fear will keep the people obedient." Marcus leaned back against the wall, his jaw tightening. It was too familiar. He had seen this before. On other worlds, in other wars. Corrupt leaders who used basic needs as weapons. "Your brother," he said. "You stole for him?" Lyra nodded, her eyes glistening. "He hasn't had water. In days, he's weak. Too weak to walk." Marcus's voice softened. "Where is he now?" "In the ruins, past the old watchtower," she said. "It's hidden. The guards never go that far." He nodded slowly. "Then that's where we're going." Her eyes widened. "But we can't. The gates are guarded, and they'll be waiting for us." A faint smile touched Marcus's lips. "Then we won't use the gates." He moved toward the broken wall, peering out. The street beyond was quiet. Only the sound of wind against stone. He turned back to her. "Will? Need to take the old aqueducts." She blinked. "The underground tunnels. They're dangerous. No one goes there." "That's exactly why they'll work." Marcus replied. Lyra hesitated, but nodded. She had no other choice. Still, a shadow of fear lingered in her eyes. "If we get caught down there?" she began. Marcus cut her off gently. We won't. They waited until the street outside was silent. Then Marcus led her through the back exit. Sticking close to the walls, they moved like shadows, slipping through abandoned lanes and hidden corners. At one point, a patrol passed just 10 paces away. Lyra's breath caught, but Marcus's calm presence kept her still. Finally, they reached the edge of the city's old quarter. Beyond it lay broken stone arches, the remains of the ancient water system. The aqueduct entrance yawned like a black mouth in the ground. Lyra stared at it, her hands trembling. It smells like death, she whispered. Marcus stepped forward. Testing the first rung of the rusted ladder, we'll be fine, he said, though his voice was more confident than his eyes. He glanced up at her. Once we're inside, they won't be able to track us, not easily. She took a deep breath and followed him down into the darkness. The air grew cooler, but heavy, as if it had been trapped for years. Their footsteps echoed softly in the narrow tunnel. Water dripped from somewhere far ahead, the sound almost mocking. Lyra gripped the flask tighter, a reminder of why she was here. Marcus's voice came low in the dark. We'll get to your brother, but first, we survive this. From somewhere deep in the tunnel, a sound stirred. It wasn't water, and it wasn't the wind. It was slow, deliberate, and moving toward them. The sound in the tunnel grew louder. It echoed against the damp stone walls like slow, heavy footsteps. Lyra's grip on the flask tightened until her knuckles turned pale. Marcus raised a hand, signaling her to stay still. They stood in the darkness, breathing as quietly as they could. The drip of water somewhere ahead seemed to count the seconds. Then, from the shadows, a low growl rolled toward them. Lyra's eyes widened. What is that? She whispered. Marcus didn't answer. His focus was on the faint movement in the dark. A shape emerged, hulking and misshapen. Its eyes glowed faintly green, catching what little light came from above. The creature's body was long and sinewy. With clawed hands dragging along the wet floor, Marcus stepped forward slightly, putting himself between Lyra and the thing. Stay behind me, he murmured. The creature sniffed the air, its nostrils flaring at the scent of water. Marcus realized it wasn't hunting them, it was hunting what they carried. The flask, without looking back, he whispered, When I move, you run. But, she began, no arguments. His voice was sharp, but calm, in one smooth motion. Marcus yanked a small flare from his belt and struck it. A sudden burst of red light filled the tunnel. The creature hissed and recoiled, shielding its eyes. Go. Marcus shouted. Lyra darted past him, sprinting deeper into the tunnel. The light guiding her way, Marcus backed away slowly, keeping the flare between himself and the beast. When he was sure it wouldn't follow, he turned and ran after her. They didn't stop until the tunnel curved and opened into a larger chamber. Here, broken pillars rose from the ground. Remnants of the ancient water system, the air was cooler, but carried the faint smell of decay. Lyra was bent over. Gasping for breath, Marcus joined her, scanning the shadows. That thing won't follow far, he said. But there might be more. Her voice trembled. I've never been down here before. He gave a small nod. That's why it's our best chance. They moved to the far side of the chamber, where another tunnel sloped upward. Marcus stopped and leaned against the wall, thinking. Lyra watched him silently, waiting for his next words. We can't just wander, he said at last. We need a plan, something that gets us to your brother without the guards ever knowing we were here. Her eyes narrowed in thought. There's a service hatch near the old watchtower. The traders used it before the city closed the tunnels. Marcus nodded. That's our exit, but it's locked, she added quickly. And the key is with the guard captain. A faint smile touched his lips. Then we take it. She stared at him. You mean? Go back? Not the market, he said. The guard post on the eastern wall, it's smaller. Less guarded at night, he began pacing slowly, mapping out the idea in his mind. We'll wait until dark. Move through the side streets. Get in, take the key, and leave before they even know. Lyra bit her lip. And if they catch us? Then we make sure they don't, he replied simply. She wasn't sure if it was bravery or recklessness in his voice, but she realized he spoke like someone who had done this kind of thing before. They sat in silence for a while, conserving their energy. Above them, faint echoes of the city's life drifted through cracks in the stone. The sound of distant bells told Marcus that afternoon was already fading. Soon the streets above would shift into the quieter hours, the perfect time. When the last light from above dimmed, Marcus rose. Time to move, he said. Lyra followed closely as they navigated the tunnels. Every turn felt like a gamble. The darkness hid both safety and danger. Once they heard another growl far behind, but it didn't follow. Finally, they found a ladder leading up to a rusted grate. Marcus pushed it gently. It gave way with a soft groan. They emerged into a narrow alley behind a cluster of storage sheds. The night air was cooler, carrying the faint scent of spice and smoke from the market. The guard post wasn't far. Marcus pointed to a low wall in the distance, shadows moving. Along its top, that's where we need to be, he whispered. They crouched behind crates, moving when the patrols looked away. Every step was careful, every sound deliberate. When they reached the post, Marcus studied it. 2 guards inside. One outside, easy enough if they were fast. He turned to Lyra. Stay hidden until I call. She nodded, clutching the flask to her chest. Her eyes followed him as he disappeared into the shadows toward the post. The seconds stretched, Lyra's ears picked up the faint sounds of movement, a soft thud, a muffled grunt, then silence. Her breath caught as she saw a figure approaching from the dark, Marcus, and in his hand, a small ring of keys. We've got it, he said quietly. But before she could smile, the sharp blast of a whistle cut through the night. Somebody had seen them. The whistle's shriek echoed through the quiet night. Marcus's head snapped toward the sound, his jaw tightening. Move, he said sharply. Pulling Lyra into the shadows behind them, voices rose as the guards reacted, the clatter of boots growing louder. They ducked behind a line of stacked barrels, the smell of stale grain thick in the air. Lyra's heart pounded so loud she was certain the guards could hear it. Marcus scanned the dark alley ahead, then grabbed her hand. This way, he whispered, leading her into a narrow side passage barely wide enough for 2 people to pass. The space was tight and smelled of damp stone. Lyra's shoulder brushed the rough wall as they moved quickly. At the end of the alley, Marcus stopped, pulling a small hook and thin wire from his belt. He knelt beside a wooden hatch in the ground, the service entrance to the old aqueduct near the eastern wall. This will get us past the gates, he murmured. Working the lock with careful precision, a loud crash came from behind them. The guards were searching every corner. Hurry, Lyra urged, her voice tight with fear. Marcus twisted the wire. The lock gave a soft click, and the hatch swung open. Cool air rose from the dark opening, smelling faintly of old water and rust. In, Marcus said. Lowering himself first, then helping her down, they landed on the stone floor of the tunnel. The light from above vanishing as Marcus closed the hatch. The darkness wrapped around them like a heavy cloak. Only the faint drip of water broke the silence. Marcus lit a small lamp from his pack, the glow casting long, shifting shadows on the walls. This tunnel runs under the wall, he explained quietly. If we move fast, we can reach the watchtower and your brother before sunrise. Lyra nodded, her fear replaced with determination. The thought of her brother drinking clean water for the first time in days pushed her forward. The path was uneven, stones cracked from centuries of neglect. Rats skittered in the corners, and once a pale lizard darted across their path. But Marcus kept a steady pace, checking each turn before signaling Lyra to follow. Finally, the tunnel began to slope upward, and a faint glimmer of moonlight appeared ahead. They climbed to a rusted grate, Marcus using the keys to unlock it silently. Beyond was the shadow of the old watchtower, its stones crumbling with age. The city walls loomed nearby, but the area was quiet. No patrols in sight. "This is it," Marcus whispered, helping Lyra out onto the ground. But as they stepped into the open, a sharp voice rang out. "Stop right there." From the darkness emerged a towering figure in black armor. His visor glinted in the moonlight, and his weapon hummed with deadly energy. Marcus instantly pushed Lyra behind him, his own blade drawn. The enforcer's deep voice rumbled. "You thought you could steal from us and walk away." Marcus didn't answer. His stance spoke for him. The enforcer lunged, swinging his heavy weapon with surprising speed. Marcus sidestepped, the strike smashing into the stone with a deafening crack. He countered with a sharp slash, sparks flying as steel met armor. Lyra crouched low, gripping the flask. Her eyes darted toward the base of the watchtower. A small storage shed sat against it. She recognized it instantly. "Marcus?" "That's where they keep the supply barrels," she hissed. He gave the smallest nod, still locked in combat. "Go," he said through clenched teeth. "Fill as much as you can." She sprinted toward the shed, the door creaking as she forced it open. Inside, the cool air was heavy with the scent of fresh water. Barrels lined the walls, their surfaces beaded with condensation. She grabbed a small jug, filling it quickly, the sound of water splashing like music to her ears. Outside, Marcus and the enforcer clashed again and again. Each blow shook the ground, each strike forcing Marcus back a step, but the human fought with precision. Using speed to counter brute strength, a lucky swing sent the enforcer stumbling. Giving Marcus a brief opening, he seized it. Driving his blade into a gap in the armor, the enforcer roared, swinging wildly. Marcus ducked, rolled, and came up in front of the shed, just as Lyra emerged with 2 jugs. "That's all I can carry," she gasped. "Good enough." Marcus replied, grabbing one himself, but the enforcer was already rising, blood dripping from his wound, his eyes burning with rage. Lyra's stomach tightened. They were so close to escaping. Marcus glanced at her, his voice low and urgent. "When I say run, don't look back." She shook her head. "Not without you." He gave her a faint smile. "You will trust me," the enforcer charged. The ground trembling under his weight, Marcus met him head-on, blades sparking in the moonlight. For a moment, it was only the sound of steel and the rush of their breathing. Then Marcus shouted, "Now!" Marcus's shout tore through the night air. "Now?" Lyra didn't think she ran. The jugs of water clutched tightly in her arms. Her feet pounded over the dry ground, every step pulling her farther from the clash of steel behind her. The sound of battle rang out, the sharp hiss of blades, the deep growl of the enforcer. She wanted to look back, but Marcus's words echoed in her mind. "Don't look back." She darted toward the base of the watchtower, weaving between fallen stones. The ruins stretched ahead, dark and silent behind her. Marcus fought like a man with nothing to lose. The enforcer strikes were powerful enough to splinter stone, but Marcus was faster, turning each heavy blow into an opening. Still, the sheer force of the armored giant kept pressing him back. Marcus knew he couldn't win by strength alone. He waited, baiting the enforcer into an overextended swing. When it came, Marcus ducked low, rolling beneath the weapon and slashing at the back of the knee joint. The enforcer staggered, roaring in pain. Marcus didn't wait. He turned and sprinted toward Lyra. The enforcer tried to follow, but his damaged leg slowed him. Lyra spotted Marcus in the moonlight, her heart leaping with relief. But behind him, the black armored figure still loomed. Limping but dangerous. Keep moving. Marcus called. They ran together into the deeper ruins, the air cooling as the night wrapped around them. Every shadow felt like a hiding place. Every broken wall a shield. At last, the ruins gave way to open ground. Beyond lay the old stone arch that marked the entrance to the wasteland. Somewhere past that arch was the hidden shelter where Lyra's brother waited. Her legs burned with exhaustion, but the thought of him gave her strength. They reached the arch and slipped through. On the other side, the wasteland stretched wide under the stars. Rocks jutted like broken teeth, and the ground crunched under their feet. They moved quickly but carefully, avoiding open ground where the moonlight could reveal them. The enforcers' distant shouts faded into the night. Finally, a low mound appeared ahead, the remains of an ancient bunker. "This is it," Lyra whispered, her voice trembling. They slipped inside through a narrow opening. The air inside cool and still. In the dim light, Marcus saw a small figure lying on a blanket of rags. The boy's face was pale, his lips cracked, his eyes barely open. Lyra dropped to her knees beside him. "Rin?" "It's me," she whispered, brushing his hair back. His gaze flickered toward her, but his voice was too weak to speak. She uncorked one of the jugs with shaking hands and poured a trickle into his mouth. He swallowed slowly, then again, his breathing easing. Marcus stood a few steps away, watching quietly. There was a look in his eyes, part relief, part something heavier. Lyra glanced back at him, tears running down her face. "You saved him," she said softly. Marcus shook his head. "No. You did. I just made sure you got here." They stayed in the bunker until the boy had drunk enough to sleep. The silence was peaceful now, broken only by the faint whisper of wind outside. Lyra sat beside her brother, the flask still in her lap. Her eyes moved to Marcus. "Why risk yourself for us?" He looked at the sleeping boy before answering. "Years ago, I watched people. I cared about die for water," he said quietly. "I couldn't save them. But I could save you." His voice carried no pride, only a steady certainty. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Lyra whispered, "I'll never forget." When dawn began to touch the horizon, Marcus stood. "I should go before they start searching this far." Lyra's chest tightened. "Where will you go?" He gave a faint smile. "Somewhere they need help." He started toward the door, his boots crunching softly on the stone. Lyra stood quickly. "Marcus," she called. He turned. The morning light catching his scarred face, she stepped forward and pressed the small, battered flask into his hand. "For you," she said, "it's not much, but it's the last drop." He looked at it, then at her, and nodded, without another word. He stepped into the pale light of morning. His figure grew smaller against the endless desert until it vanished beyond the rocks. Lyra stood there for a long time, the wind tugging at her clothes. Somewhere out there, the human who had saved her brother was walking into another fight. And she knew one thing for certain: his story wasn't over.